6 years ago, Marissa Bellmont's life was torn apart when her daughter vanished without a trace during a routine visit to Bayshore Plaza. No screams, no witnesses, just silence and a mother's endless search. For years, she followed every lead, begged for answers, and refused to give up. But it wasn't until a quiet night in Puerto Azul, near a private yacht, that everything changed, and what she discovered left her breathless with horror. Marissa Bellmont had always believed the hardest day of her life had already passed, the day her husband died in a freak boating accident off the coast of Coronado. But nothing could prepare her for the afternoon she lost her daughter. It was a Thursday in late spring, the kind of day when sunlight melted over the sidewalks of San Diego like gold, and the scent of salt water drifted inland on the wind. She had taken a half day from work to spend time with her 6-year-old daughter Lila, a bright, giggly child who could turn a cereal aisle into a stage and made friends with seagulls. Bayshore Plaza, a recently renovated shopping center with an indoor play zone for kids called Wonder Zone, had always felt safe, too clean, too family-oriented, too visible for anything sinister to happen. Marissa sipped her coffee while Lila bounced toward the play zone's entry, her ponytail flicking back and forth like a metronome. "You promise you'll stay close?" Marissa called after her. Lila spun and saluted dramatically. "Yes, ma'am. I'll just be by the space tunnel slide." It was a routine afternoon. Marissa browsed a few stores, checked in every 20 minutes, smiled as she saw Lila making foam block castles with other kids. At 3:16 p.m., the fire alarm went off, loud, shrill, and chaotic. Red lights flashed across the plaza like sirens in a dream. Mall employees herded shoppers toward emergency exits, the intercom blaring instructions. Marissa's heart dropped. She turned and sprinted toward Wonder Zone, but a security guard blocked her path. "You can't go back in," he said. "We're evacuating." "My daughter's in there," she screamed, but it was too late. The crowd swallowed her, and minutes turned to hours in a blur of questions, phone calls, and panic. When the alarm was deemed a false trigger, no fire, just a technical fault, parents rushed back into the play zone to reunite with their children. Lila wasn't among them. At 5:07 p.m., Marissa filed a missing child report. The local police, mayor's security, and a growing number of volunteers searched every hallway, closet, and parking garage. Flyers went up within hours. The scent of kettle corn that once made Bayshore Plaza now made Marissa nauseous. The next day, the San Diego PD showed her the security footage. "We caught something," the detective said cautiously. The screen showed the corridor outside the restrooms, Lila skipping in, her arms flapping like wings. 3 minutes later, a tall figure exited the same door holding a small body, limp, unconscious. Sleeping, cloaked under a large brown coat. The figure had a distinct limp in the right leg and wore a beige baseball cap. Face was blurred, not just by poor footage, but digitally. "We believe the feed was intercepted and altered," the officer explained. "Whoever did this knows what they're doing. In the coming weeks, every theory was exhausted. Ransom? No note. Custody dispute? No known claims. Trafficking? Nothing confirmed." Marissa refused to stop. She barely ate, slept only when her body collapsed, and kept searching. The media picked up the story. Single mother's worst nightmare. Vanished from a restroom in daylight. The narrative bounced from screen to screen, yet leads dried like ink in the sun. Lila was gone. 5 years passed, not like a blur, but like a slow erosion, each day grinding down the edges of hope, but never quite erasing it. For Marissa Bellmont, grief became a routine. Cold, predictable, and binding, like the fog that often blanketed San Diego's coasts each morning. While the rest of the city moved forward, new shops opened at Bayshore Plaza. New families strolled past the Wonder Zone as if its walls didn't echo with her daughter's absence. Marissa returned, again and again, armed with new flyers and the same unwavering stare. Every Monday and Thursday, precisely at 3:00 p.m., she would walk into the plaza wearing her faded denim jacket, her messenger bag weighed down with stacks of posters bearing the image of a 6-year-old girl frozen in time. Lila's toothy smile, her aquamarine eyes, the pink butterfly clip she'd worn that day. The posters were tattered by rain, peeled by the indifferent hands of passers-by, or occasionally taken down by security for violating promotional space policies. But Marissa never stopped. She carried tape, pushpins, even a staple gun on the days no one was watching. Shoppers sometimes gave her sympathetic glances. Others avoided eye contact entirely. Some whispered, "It's been years, poor woman. Still coming every week. Isn't it time she moved on?" But Marissa didn't care. Her daughter had vanished from this place. Until she had answers, or until Lila came back, this mall remained sacred and haunted ground. In those years, her world narrowed. Her food cart business dwindled to a side job, sustained only by loyalty and the pity of region. Her nights were restless, often spent scrolling through cold case forums or responding to anonymous tips that led nowhere. She stopped attending church. She stopped celebrating holidays. Her home became a museum to Lila, drawings on the fridge, an untapped bedroom filled with soft animals, and a calendar forever frozen on the month of May. Among the few constants in her unraveling life was Claire Mendoza, the current operations manager of Bayshore Plaza. Claire was in her early 40s, stylish in a practical way, with a clipped tone and efficient posture. To most people, she was just another corporate figure keeping the mall clean and functional. But to Marissa, she was the only staff member who never asked her to leave, never told security, never tore down the posters herself. On the contrary, when Claire found Marissa taping another flyer to the kiosk near Wonder Zone, she would offer a warm cup of coffee or silently hand her extra tape. There was something unspoken in their exchanges, a quiet ritual of grief and grace. What Marissa didn't know, what Claire never found the courage to confess, was that 5 years earlier, Claire had recognized something chilling in the security footage. Not just the limp of the man or the eerily calm way he carried Lila under that oversized coat, but the glint of a ring on his finger, a ring she had seen before. Claire had once worked for the Ashford family, wealthy, old money, and inclusive. Years before she managed Bayshore Plaza, she had been a live-in assistant and event organizer at one of the Ashford estate homes in Napa Valley. She had left abruptly after a troubling encounter with Richard Ashford, the family patriarch. He had made an inappropriate comment about her niece, only 9 at the time, during a summer function. Claire had brushed it off in public, but fled the property and never returned. She kept that part of her resume off LinkedIn. When news of Lila's disappearance broke, something in Claire twisted. She recognized the method, the careful timing, the manipulation of security systems, but she said nothing. Fear and guilt wrapped around her like vines. If she spoke, what proof did she have? Her word against an empire. Instead, she did the only thing she felt she could do without endangering herself. She stayed close to the case. She made sure Marissa's posters stayed up longer than mall policy allowed. She rerouted maintenance schedules so Marissa could work undisturbed. She added Lila's face to the digital mall directories when no one was watching. Every year on the anniversary, Claire placed a small bouquet of pink orchids in front of Wonder Zone. She told the staff it was a marketing prop only Marissa ever seemed to understand. And yet, the guilt didn't fade. If anything, it grew deeper with every glance into Marissa's hollowed eyes. She had the face of someone who had memorized absence, and it haunted Claire more than she dared admit. Then, in late April, nearly 5 years to the day Lila disappeared, something changed. Claire was reviewing overnight maintenance reports when she noticed a glitch in the camera system near the East Service exit, same exit used by the limping man in the original footage. The techs wrote it off as routine lag, but Claire knew better. She printed the report and tucked it into a file. That night she went home, poured herself a glass of white wine, and opened her laptop. For the first time in 5 years, she typed the name Ashford into a search engine. She didn't sleep. By morning, her hands were trembling. She arrived at work early, hours before the plaza opened, and waited near the loading dock. When Marissa arrived, tired, as always, but focused, Claire hesitated before speaking. Her voice wavered. "Marissa, I think there's something I need to tell you." Marissa looked up, surprised. Claire had never initiated personal conversation beyond polite check-ins. "What is it?" she asked, her hands still clutching a roll of fresh posters. Claire opened her mouth, but before the words came, the sound of distant wedding music drifted through the plaza's open-air atrium, soft, classical, and completely out of place. Both women turned. The music wasn't coming from the mall. It was coming from somewhere beyond the far glass walls. Claire had never made personal offers before, which is why the invitation startled Marissa more than the sudden shift in her voice that morning. "You've been carrying this grief for 5 years," Claire had said, handing her a neatly folded brochure and a set of plane tickets. "I have a friend with a private villa in Puerto Azul. It's serene, quiet, right by the ocean. Just..." At first, Marissa resisted. The idea of leaving San Diego, of stepping away from her vigil at Bayshore Plaza, felt like betrayal. But something in Claire's eyes, soft, urgent, perhaps laced with guilt, moved her to agree. She told herself it would be temporary, that a few days might clear the fog from her brain and restore the strength she would need for the next stage of her fight. The flight to Puerto Azul was uneventful, the kind where Marissa stared blankly out the window, watching the clouds dissolve like thoughts she couldn't hold on to. Claire was unusually chatty, filling the silences with light anecdotes about the town, the local food, her friend who worked in property development and rarely used the villa anymore. Marissa only half listened, her mind still tethered to San Diego, to Wonder Zone, to the faint scent of cotton candy and panic that clung to her bones. When they arrived, the air was thick with salt and humidity, wrapping around them like a warm towel. The villa was breathtaking, a whitewashed structure with arcing verandas, palm trees framing the driveway, and the sound of waves crashing in the near distance. Claire showed her to a master bedroom with ocean-facing windows and a carved wooden bed that smelled faintly of sandalwood and lemon oil. At night, after a long, restless sleep, Marissa rose early. The sun was just beginning to filter through gauzy curtains, casting golden streaks across the terracotta floor tiles. She pulled on a simple dress, tied her hair into a loose bun, and made her way barefoot to the deck. Claire was already up, sipping from a tall glass of orange juice and dressed in crisp linen. "Thought we could grab breakfast at a cafe down the beach," she said, her two briefs. "They serve this insane coconut bread. You'll love it." Marissa managed a nod, and together they stepped off the wooden patio, down a short path, and through a gate that opened directly onto the sand. The beach stretched endlessly, dotted with scattered shells and early morning joggers. The air was warm and sticky, the ocean a glistening blue ribbon that curved beyond sight. As they walked, Marissa noticed a fenced-off area up ahead. Rows of white folding chairs were arranged neatly in the sand, and a flower-draped archway stood like a sentinel near the shoreline. Claire squinted. "Looks like someone setting up for a private event." But Marissa's gaze was fixed, her step slowing. There was something off. The chairs were too pristine, the guards at the periphery too stiff, their eyes scanning the beach like security detail, not hospitality staff. A few guests stood in loose clusters, speaking in hushed tones, none holding phones or drinks. And then the music began. A soft classical melody carried faintly on the breeze as the guests turned toward the villa that loomed just behind the wedding setup. From the front doors emerged two figures, one tall, male, slow in his steps, and beside him a child. A girl. She wore a white dress that brushed her ankles, her hair arranged in elegant curls pinned with tiny pearls. Her hands clutched a bouquet that seemed too large for her delicate frame. As she walked, her eyes remained downcast, her posture rigid. Marissa's breath caught. She blinked. Her heart stuttered, then raced so violently she thought she might collapse into the sand. Claire had stopped too, her mouth slightly open. "Wait!" The girl's face tilted just enough to catch the sunlight, and the glint of her aquamarine eyes stabbed through Marissa like a knife. It was a face she had memorized, etched in her mind through years of tears and repetition. "Little Neela," Marissa whispered, so softly it barely escaped her lips, but the word exploded in her chest like thunder. The world around her blurred. Her feet moved before her brain caught up, trudging through the sand toward the roped-off section. Claire grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "Marissa, wait. We can't just..." But Marissa shook her off. The girl was real. She wasn't a memory or a hallucination. She was here, alive, and dressed like a bride. A sharp voice cut through the music. "Ma'am, this is private property," said one of the guards, stepping directly into Marissa's path. He was tall, clean-shaven, and wore dark sunglasses that made him look more like a mercenary than event staff. "I know that girl," Marissa said, her voice shaking. "That's my daughter." The guard didn't flinch. "You need to leave I'm not going anywhere until I talk to her. She's not who you think. Claire appeared beside her again, whispering, Marissa, we need to think. This could be dangerous. Marissa's fists clenched. She looked right at me, Claire. That's Lila. Another guard approached, more subtle, speaking into a radio. The tension in the air thickened. The music, so soft and elegant moments ago, now sounded like a taunt. The man walking beside the girl, the presumed groom, placed a hand on her shoulder as they reached the front. She flinched, only slightly, but it was enough. Her body language screamed discomfort. The guests said nothing. No clapping, no whispers of adoration. Just silence. Marissa's knees weakened. She reached into her bag, pulled out the only photo she always kept in her wallet. Lila, 6 years old, beaming in front of the zoo carousel. She held it up, turned it toward Claire. Tell me that's not her? Claire stared. For a second, her eyes wavered, then, slowly, she nodded. My God, Marissa, I think you're right. But before either could move closer, a third guard appeared, taller, broader, with an earpiece. He stepped between them and the event. Back up, now. And somewhere beyond the flowers and silence, the little girl's eyes lifted again. Just a flicker. But she saw Marissa, and in that fleeting moment, recognition sparked. She mouthed something, a word that might have been, Mom? The sound of a camera clicking pulled Marissa back into her body. Claire was already dragging her away, heart pounding, breath ragged. The guards were closing in now, not violently but deliberately, and from behind the veil of that twisted ceremony, Lila's tiny voice broke through, too faint for others to hear it, again. Back at the villa, the afternoon sun hung low, bathing everything in a deceptive golden calm. But Marissa's hands trembled as she paced the living room, her breath jagged, her mind caught between disbelief and fury. It was her, she said again, her voice barely more than a whisper, but filled with urgency. It was Lila. She saw me. Claire sat stiffly at the dining table, wringing her hands, her composure cracking. I saw it too, she admitted. But you have to be careful, Marissa. These people, whoever they are, they're powerful. That wasn't just a wedding, that was something else. Marissa snapped her gaze toward her. You think I don't know that? Did you see the way she flinched when that man touched her? Claire swallowed hard. Yes, but if we push too hard too fast... Her words trailed off as a knock echoed from the front door, sharp, deliberate. Marissa froze, exchanging a look with Claire. Who would even... Claire rose, cautiously approaching the door. She opened it a crack, and the smile that greeted her was cool, calculated, and terrifyingly familiar. Ms. Mendoza, the man said smoothly. Long time. Claire stiffened. Richard, she said flatly. I figured you'd be around. Marissa approached behind her. The man turned, and his gaze locked onto her like a VA. Tall, well-dressed, in a dark suit and tailored shirt, Richard Ashford looked like he belonged on a magazine cover or in a boardroom, not lurking at a villa doorstep. His smile never touched his eyes. You must be Marissa Bellmont. She didn't answer. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded check. I believe you may have misinterpreted what you saw earlier, he began, handing it to her like an afterthought. A private family event, no need for interference. Marissa took the check with stiff fingers. Her heart sank as she read the number. $500,000, 0 cents. You're trying to buy me off, she said, her voice hollow. It's compensation, he replied coolly. For your grief, for your persistence. Consider it a gift, a way to move on. Marissa's chest tightened with rage. That was my daughter. Richard's smile sharpened. You've been through a lot. Sometimes grief plays tricks. Children change. Memories become unreliable. Claire stepped forward. Why are you here, Richard? To protect what's mine, he said plainly. You know how this works. Claire stared at him, color draining from her face. You really haven't changed, have you? He leaned in slightly. Neither have you. Still playing helper to broken mothers. He turned to Marissa. Take the check. Go home. No one else has to get hurt. Then he walked away without waiting for a reply, his guards falling into step behind him. The door shut with a soft but final click. Marissa stared at the check, then tore it in half, then into quarters, until it fluttered like confetti to the floor. Her hands shook. "Who the hell is he, Claire?" Claire looked away. "We need to talk." Upstairs, in the cool dimness of their shared villa bedroom, Claire hesitated before pulling the dresser away from the wall. Behind it, tucked in the molding, was a small black device, no larger than a matchbox. Marissa stared. "What is that?" "A camera," Claire said flatly. "There's another behind the mirror. I found them this morning." Marissa's heart raced. "You knew we were being watched?" Claire nodded, shame in her eyes. "I suspected, but I didn't want to say until I was sure." "Why would they bug the villa?" Marissa asked, though the answer was dawning on her already. Claire sat down on the edge of the bed, her posture tense. "Because it's not just any villa, it's his. Richard's. Or at least, he controls it." Marissa's blood ran cold. "You brought me here?" Claire's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know it was this bad, not until today." Marissa backed away. "Start talking now." Claire wiped her face. "Years ago, I worked for the Ashfords. I was hired as a live-in tutor for their nieces, or so they said, but the longer I stayed, the more I saw things that didn't add up. There were children that came and went, girls usually around 10 or 11. They were always quiet. Always watched." Marissa's voice was raw. "And you didn't say anything?" "I tried," Claire said, her voice cracking, "but no one listened. Richard owns people, Marissa. Judges, police. I left when I realized what he was grooming those girls for. I ran and I never looked back." "Until you brought me here," Marissa said, her voice like glass. "I thought the villa was safe. I thought maybe if we were close enough, we could find something, anything." "I didn't know Lila would be here." The silence that followed was dense. Then Marissa's voice returned, low and trembling. "It's not the first." Claire nodded slowly. "No, she's not." Marissa sat down, her whole body shaking. The truth cracked through her like a hammer through stained glass. This wasn't just about her daughter. This was bigger, more calculated, more horrifying. Claire stood up. "There's more. I found something in the closet." She pulled out a dusty storage box and handed it to bring his own. Dozens of them. Different names. Different faces. Different girls. "I think this is where they keep records. Maybe even who they've taken." Maurice stared, her breath stolen. "We need proof." "Real proof?" Claire looked down at the box. "Then we start here," but before she could reach for another file, a shadow passed by the window. Both women froze. The shadow at the window passed quickly, but it was enough to send both Marissa and Claire into a suspended silence, their eyes locked on the narrow frame of light, now still. Neither moved. Then slowly Claire stepped toward the window, lifting the sheer curtain with trembling fingers. Nothing. Just the shimmer of ocean beyond the foliage and the quiet whisper of wind against glass. "We're being watched," Claire said finally, her voice tight. "Reese need to move. Now." Marissa nodded, adrenaline sharpening her senses. They shoved the box of documents into an old duffel bag, covering it with clothes, then grabbed their phones and Claire's laptop before slipping quietly out the back of the villa and into the garden. They moved fast, through side paths that wound between flowering bushes and tall banana trees, until they reached the edge of the property. Behind a maintenance shed, partially obscured by a broken section of fencing, stood a small door embedded into the stone wall. Claire had never noticed it before. She reached for the handle. "Let's keep going," she urged, but before they could take another step, they heard a whisper behind them. "Luana," said the voice. A woman stepped out of the shadows, late 50s, with weathered skin and eyes that held a strange mix of fear and defiance. She wore a maid's uniform, but her posture was proud. "You need to come with me," she said in accented English. Marissa hesitated. "Who are you?" "I work here," Alina replied, glancing over her shoulder. "I don't have much time, but I've been waiting for someone like you." Claire stepped forward. "You know about the children?" Elena nodded. "I've known for years. I've seen things, helped where I could, but I couldn't speak until now." She slipped a folded piece of parchment from her apron pocket and handed it to Marissa. "It's old. I copied it by hand. They destroyed the original years ago." Marissa unfolded the page. It was a floor plan, crudely drawn, showing a hidden staircase beneath the villa, one that led to a sub-basement marked only as a sub. Claire's eyes widened. That's where they kept the girls, isn't it? Elena didn't answer directly. They call it the archive, but it's not just files. It's where he stores everything? Where is the entrance? Marissa asked. Elena pointed to the wine cellar behind the main kitchen. There's a loose tile behind the second shelf. Pry it open. But you must go tonight. They're leaving tomorrow. Everything will be gone. Are you helping us? Claire asked. Elena looked at her, then at Marissa. Because once, a girl like your daughter looked me in the eye and asked, "Will you help me?" And I said nothing. Her voice cracked. I won't say nothing again. Without another word, Elena turned and vanished back into the darkness. That night, under cover of silence, Marissa and Claire returned to the villa. Most of the lights were off. The wedding guests were either gone or asleep. They slipped inside through the back entrance, moving like ghosts through the marble hallways. The kitchen was empty. Marissa found the wine cellar door and quietly pushed it open. Inside, the air was cold and damp, and the shelves were lined with dusty bottles. Claire counted aloud. Second shelf? Here. They removed the bottles and tapped on the stone wall behind. A hollow sound responded. Marissa knelt, feeling along the grooves, and found the tile. With a sharp pull it lifted, revealing a narrow tunnel and a staircase descending into darkness. Claire turned on her phone's flashlight. Ready? Marissa nodded, though her stomach twisted with dread. They climbed down into the black, the light illuminating old stone steps and walls stained with mold and time. At the bottom, the passage widened into a corridor with a steel door at the far end. A keypad blinked faintly on the wall. Claire stared. We need a code. Marissa thought quickly. Try Lila's birthday. Claire typed it in. Nothing. They tried her own. Still locked. Then Claire remembered the files upstairs. Try the number on that photo label, she said. Marissa keyed it in. The light blinked green. The door unlocked with a heavy hiss. Inside, the air changed. It was colder, metallic, filled with a faint chemical smell that made Marissa's eyes sting. The room was massive, filled with file cabinets, metal drawers, and long tables stacked with manila folders and photo albums. Screens hung from the walls, some playing grainy surveillance footage, others frozen on blueprints and lists. Claire began searching immediately, pulling out folders, scanning pages. Marissa moved toward the far end, where a series of drawings were pinned to a corkboard. Children's drawings. Her breath caught. One was unmistakably Lila's. She recognized the rainbow scribble she used to draw in the corner of every page. Then her eyes landed on another drawing. It was nearly identical in style. Same rainbow corner, same handwriting, but the name scrawled on it read, Evie. Her heart stopped. She flipped through more pages. Evie, over and over again. Another girl. Same eyes, same curls, same face. Claire stepped beside her. Look. They both stared at the drawings. These aren't Lila's, Claire said slowly, or not just hers. Marissa's voice shook. They're twins. She stumbled back, digging into one of the open folders. Inside was a birth certificate. 2 names. Lila Grace Bellmont, her voice respectfully. She had a sister, Marissa whispered. I never knew. They told me. Her voice broke. Claire's hands moved swiftly, flipping through adjacent folders. They separated them from birth. Someone arranged this. Marissa fell into a chair, the truth hitting like a tidal wave. I didn't lose one daughter. I lost 2. Claire knelt beside her, but before they could move a sound echoed from the corridor behind them. The echo in the corridor grew louder, closer, sharper with every step, forcing Claire and Marissa to snatch the files and scatter behind a steel shelf, their breaths tight and shallow. A flashlight beam skimmed across the room moments later, followed by the shuffle of thick-soled shoes. A guard large frame moved slowly into the archive, scanning left and right, unaware of their presence. Claire's hand tightened around a metal clipboard, ready to swing, but the guard soon exited, muttering something into his radio. They waited a few seconds longer before moving again. We need to get this to the authorities, Claire whispered, her voice trembling. Marissa nodded, but her face was pale, her gaze locked on the folder in her lap, the one that confirmed Evie's existence. They left the archive through the same tunnel, resealing the tile behind them, and fled to the edge of the property, where a contact of Claire's, an old taxi driver named Renzo, waited to take them into town. At a quiet roadside cafe on the outskirts of Puerto Azul, Marissa sat in the back corner, hunched over the table, as Claire uploaded copies of the files to a secure server. The cafe buzzed with quiet locals, tourists none the wiser. Marissa's phone vibrated, an unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. The voice on the other end was low, rich, and unmistakable. "You're a persistent woman, Miss Bellmont." Marissa's blood froze. "Richard?" He chuckled. "Or should I say, Mrs. Ashford?" Her hand tightened around the phone. "Don't you dare—" "Oh, but I do," he said calmly, "because under the old rights of the Dominion Path, she is my wife, recognized in 5 sovereign enclaves, sanctified, irrevocable." Marissa felt like vomiting. "You took her." "She was sick, she was chosen," Richard said. "Her bloodline, her spirit, rare, radiant. We raised them to rule, not to rot in mediocrity." "You're sick. You broke into my archive," he continued, undeterred. "You stole what's mine, but it's not too late to come to an understanding. You mean take your money and pretend she never existed?" "No," Richard said, voice sharpening. "I mean you can join us, learn the truth, reclaim your family, in our way." Marissa hung up without a word. Her hands trembled as she relayed the call to Claire. "He thinks this is holy, like it's justified." Claire's mouth tightened. "It's a cult, old, deeply entrenched. I've heard whispers. They call themselves the Dominion Path. He's not just a man with money, he's their high elder." They returned to the villa only briefly to pack their things. Claire insisted they change locations. That night, as they sheltered in a cheap motel room by the fishing docks, Marissa couldn't sleep. The room was hot, the fan rattled, but it wasn't the discomfort that kept her awake. It was the knowledge that Lila had been trapped not just physically, but mentally, indoctrinated into something she didn't understand. The files had detailed procedures, rituals, even recordings of past bonding ceremonies. One note had haunted her: Subject 4B attempted unauthorized departure twice. Tracking chip successful in recovery. Marissa reread it now, over and over. "They chipped her like a dog." Claire sat up. "We have to get it out." "How?" Marissa asked. "We can't walk into a clinic with no questions asked." Claire opened her phone and made a call. A few hours later, a middle-aged woman arrived under the cover of dawn, wearing a faded nurse's uniform and carrying a black leather bag. She introduced herself only as Carla. "Claire told me what you need. I won't ask questions, but if what you're saying is true, you need to move fast." On a mattress with a thin towel beneath her, Lila, who had been rescued only hours earlier in a raid coordinated by Claire's contact, lay unconscious, still under mild sedation. Marissa sat by her side, holding her hand, tears silently rolling down her cheeks. Carola found the chip using a handheld scanner. It emitted a faint but consistent beep from the back of Lila's shoulder. "It's deep, near muscle," she said. "Wanted it to stay hidden." Using a local anesthetic, sterile tools, and a small flashlight, Carla performed the removal in less than 10 minutes. When the tiny glass capsule finally emerged, Marissa stared at it like it was a bullet. Claire placed it in a sealed bag and crushed it beneath a metal wrench. Lila stirred hours later. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then locking on Marissa's face with tentative familiarity. "Mom?" she said, her voice barely audible. Marissa leaned forward, stroking her hair. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." Lila's brow furrowed. He said, "You forgot me." "Never," Marissa choked. "I searched every day." Lila's lip trembled. "He said if I left again, the chip would burn me. I tried before. Twice. They brought me back." Marissa felt her heart fracture all over again. "You're safe now. It's gone. He can't find you anymore." Lila closed her eyes, relief etched across her small face. "I kept drawing pictures of you. I hid them." Claire nodded. "We found them. They led us to you." Later that night, as Claire monitored the news feed, already flooded with questions after the failed wedding that morning, Marissa sat beside Lila, watching her sleep. But she couldn't rest. Because now she knew who Richard truly was, and more terrifying than that, she knew how many others like him existed. The files named cells in other countries, market registries marked with red stars. It was not just one man or one girl. It was a network, and they had only peeled back the first layer. Marissa's hands trembled as she dialed the emergency line, her fingers sticky with sweat, her heart slamming against her ribs like a warning bell. She gave them the address of the villa, details of the hidden room, the files, the drawings, and every brutal truth she could compress into one breathless plea. The dispatcher took the information politely, but Marissa couldn't shake the cold monotone in her voice. She hung up and turned to Claire, who was watching over Lila as she slept, her chest rising and falling softly in the dim motel light. "They're on their way," Marissa whispered. "They said they'll send a team." Claire nodded, but her jaw was tight. "That doesn't mean they're not part of it," she muttered. "Afford's reach runs deep, Marissa. We can't afford to trust uniforms just because they show up." "Then we expose them," Marissa said. "All of them." The moment they were certain Lila was stable, Claire opened her laptop and began sorting the digital files they had scanned from the archives. There were dozens, photos, lists, hand-drawn maps of other properties, even documents hinting at international transport routes for children. But the crown jewel of their evidence was a short, grainy surveillance clip showing Lila standing before Richard in ceremonial white, flanked by guards, as he recited vows from a tattered old book written in Latin. Claire stared at it, her fingers hovering over the trackpad. "We live-streamed this," she said. "All of it?" "No," Marie said sharply. "Not the whole clip, not her face, not yet. We protect her." Claire nodded. "But the setup, the wedding, the guards, the crowd, we show just enough to make them ask questions." Claire set up her phone on a tripod, positioned the screen to show a paused still from the footage, and began speaking. "My name is Claire Mendoza. I used to work for Richard Ashford. What I'm about to tell you is going to sound like a conspiracy theory, but it's not. It's real. Today, a wedding took place at a private villa in Puerto Azul. The bride was a child, the groom a billionaire who controls a powerful and ancient organization known as the Dominion Path. I was there, I saw it, I helped expose it. And I'm asking for your help before they bury this truth like they've buried so many others." She streamed it live across every platform: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. Within 30 minutes it had over 100,000 views. Within 2 hours, over 1 million. Comments flooded in. "This can't be real. Where is the FBI? Name and shame them." "I'm a lawyer. Contact me." "That's the Ashford logo. I worked in one of their hotels." News outlets began picking it up, hesitant at first, then ravenous. Hashtag exploded. "Save the children. Puerto Azul bride, Dominion Path exposed." Marissa's phone buzzed nonstop with messages from journalists, activists, and strangers who had recognized symbols, names, even faces in the footage. But one message stood out. It was from a verified account, Samantha Vale, a human rights attorney with the Global Children's Defense Alliance. "I'm in San Juan. Just saw the live stream. I'm on the next flight to Puerto Azul. Do not move without legal representation. I'm bringing backup." Marissa felt her knees weaken with something dangerously close to hope. But that hope nearly died when the police finally arrived at the villa. The SUV that pulled up bore official markings, lights flashing, but the men who stepped out moved with sluggish indifference. No urgency, no surprise. The lead officer, a man in his 50s with a tan and a Rolex, approached the front door without drawing his weapon, his demeanor more annoyed than alarmed cars across the street. "He's one of them," Claire said. "I recognize him. He used to visit the Ashfords during my time at their estate." The officer knocked once, then was led inside without resistance. A full 15 minutes passed, then 20, then 30. Finally he exited, sunglasses back on, and climbed into his vehicle. The SUV pulled away without another word. No children in custody, no arrests, no perimeter tape. Marissa nearly collapsed onto the pavement. "They're not going to do anything," she said, voice hollow. "They're going to cover it up." Claire grabbed her arm. "That's why we went public. Now we watch them squirm." They didn't have to wait long. Less than 2 hours later, a private jet touched down on the Puerto Azul tarmac. Out stepped Samantha Vale, tall, composed, a black satchel in one hand and a phone already pressed to her ear. Her team followed, an investigator, a trauma specialist, and a translator. Within the hour, they were knocking on the door of the local police station. Cameras rolled as Samantha confronted the same officer who had walked out of the villa earlier. "You left a scene where a child was illegally confined," she said into a microphone. "You ignored digital evidence and refused to take custody of victims. I'm filing obstruction of justice charges immediately." Claire filmed it all, live, again, and this time people were watching. Local politicians began tweeting support. The Prime Minister of a neighborhood island called for an investigation. UNICEF issued a preliminary statement, but Richard Ashford had not fled. Instead, he had doubled security at the villa, barricaded himself behind wealth and legal armor, and prepared for war. Because in his mind, he still believed he was untouchable. Despite the media pressure, the international outcry, and the sharp words of Samantha Vale echoing through every newsfeed, it took another 12 hours for a verified unit of federal investigators to arrive in Puerto Azul, their convoy escorted by plainclothes agents and 2 armored black SUVs. Claire and Marissa stood outside the villa gates as the team approached. The lead officer, a tall woman with short blonde hair and an air of military discipline, flashing her badge and giving a sharp nod. "We're here to search the property. You'll accompany us as witnesses." Marissa's stomach knotted with anticipation and dread as they passed through the ornate front doors of the Ashford villa. But the moment they stepped inside, a chill swept through the group. The place was empty, not just quiet but stripped bare, furniture missing, walls bare, rugs rolled up, curtains gone, Marissa whispered. "They cleared it." Claire shook her head in disbelief. "They were here yesterday, hours ago." One of the agents kicked open a storage room door and found nothing but empty crates and a few leftover rolls of packing tape. Another checked the basement, vacant. The archive door had been welded shut from the inside. A forensic technician turned to the officer. "They've had at least 10 hours. Whoever ran this place knew we were coming." Panic surged through Marissa's chest. "Where's Lila?" she asked, her voice cracking. No one answered. Claire ran to the master suite, checking every closet, every drawer. In the corner of the room, beside an overturned lamp, she spotted a piece of paper, crumpled and half-tucked under the bed frame. She grabbed it and flattened it out. A single line had been scribbled in blocky handwriting. No name, no context, but they both knew exactly what it meant. Pear's face paled. "He's taking her on the water." "A boat," Marissa said, breath catching. "No, he wouldn't risk public transit," he said. "He's using his yacht," Claire snapped. "I heard staff whisper about it once. The Sanctum. It's privately registered out of Malta. No extra beer." Within minutes, Claire had jammed the paper into her glove compartment, gunned the ignition of their rented sedan, and peeled out onto the coastal highway, with Marissa in the passenger seat and Samantha's legal team trying to follow in a separate vehicle. The sun had long since set, and the road stretched ahead like a winding serpent, its edges flanked by cliffs and dark ocean glimpses that flashed between palm trees and jagged outcrops. Marissa gripped the dashboard, her mind racing with images of Lila being taken aboard a vessel, tied up, hidden below deck. They reached Puerto Azul Marina just before 10 p.m. The parking lot was nearly empty, lit only by flickering lamps and the distant glow of industrial dock lights. Pier 7 was marked by a bent metal sign and a faded green bollardock. In the water beside it, a towering white yacht loomed, sleek, multi-tiered, with its engines humming quietly. Claire killed the engine. "Go," she said. "I'll loop to block the road behind it. You get her." Marissa flung open the door, sprinting down the dock, her feet slamming against the wet planks. 2 men stood on the boarding ramp, crewmen in white polos, distracted by the loading of last-minute supplies. She didn't wait. She hurled herself forward, ducked beneath the outstretched arm of one guard, and vaulted up the ramp. "Ma'am?" "You can't," one of them shouted, but she was already inside. The yacht was a palace of darkness and polished chrome. Marble floors, chandeliers that swayed with the boat's gentle bob. Marissa ran through the corridors, flinging open doors, storage, dining room, empty lounge, until she heard it. A muffled whimper. Weak. far below. She found the staircase, descended 2 levels, passed through a narrow corridor, and reached a locked door with a small viewing window. Through the glass she saw her daughter. Lila sat on the floor, arms tied loosely with velvet rope, mouth gagged, eyes wide with fear. Her body shivered, not from cold, but from the kind of horror that rewires a child's brain. Marissa screamed her name. Lila, the girl's eyes darted up, then widened in shock. Recognition, hope. Marissa rammed the door with her shoulder once, twice. Nothing. On the 3rd try, she slipped, crashing hard against the frame, pain erupting in her ribcage, sharp and bright. She screamed, both from agony and fury, and pounded on the steel again. Behind her, footsteps thundered. A guard rounded the corner, but Claire was right behind him, swinging a fire extinguisher with everything she had. Metal cracked bone. The man went down. Claire tossed Marissa the keyring clipped to his belt. Hands trembling, Marissa unlocked the door, burst inside, and dropped to her knees. She pulled the gag off Lila, who sobbed uncontrollably, burying her face in her mother's chest. "You came," she whispered. "You really came?" Marissa held her tighter than she ever had, tears streaming down her cheeks, blood seeping from her torn elbow. "I will always come for you. Always." Claire stood guard outside, listening to the sound of footsteps on the deck above. More guards. More danger. But she didn't back down. Not tonight. The moment the yacht's engine sputtered into silence and Lila collapsed into Marissa's arms, sobbing and shaking, the rest of the world faded into irrelevance. Marissa cradled her, whispering words that had once been a daily comfort, now strained through tears and disbelief. "It's me, baby. I'm here. You're safe. I've got you. I'll never let you go again." But Lila's hands, though clutching Marissa's shirt tightly, trembled with hesitation. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was thin, hoarse, and uncertain. "Are you my real mommy?" The question punched the air from Marissa's lungs. She blinked hard, trying to process the words, the distance in Lila's tone. "Of course I am, sweetheart. I've searched for you for 5 years, every single day." Lila frowned, brows knitting. "He said I was given away, because I was too loud, too messy. He said my new life was my real one." Marissa's throat closed, the rage boiling just beneath the surface, but she fought to stay gentle. "That's not true. None of that is true. You are everything to me. My whole world." For a few painful seconds, Lila just stared. Then, slowly, she whispered something that shattered the remaining doubt. "Mommy says I'm her moonlight." The phrase was barely audible, spoken like a spell. Marissa gasped, tears spilling uncontrollably. It was the lullaby she used to sing when Lila had nightmares, a phrase only they had ever known. "You remember," Marissa sobbed, holding her tighter. "You remember, baby. You remember me." Lila began to cry, too, not with confusion anymore, but with something raw and ancient, a child's grief cracking through the facade of indoctrination. "I tried to find you," she hiccuped. "Once I hid a note under the piano bench, but he found it. He told me if I tried again, I'd be sent away forever." Claire entered the cabin slowly, her shirt stained with blood from the scuffle, a cut above her eyebrow. "The rest of the team is on their way," she said quietly. "Federal agents, Samantha's people. They'll intercept the harbor." She knelt beside them. "We did it. She's safe." But Marissa wasn't listening anymore. She was too busy examining every part of her daughter's face, as if memorizing her all over again. An hour later, inside a makeshift safe house set up by child protection officers near the port, Lila lay wrapped in a warm blanket, sipping water and holding Marissa's hand tightly. Claire paced nearby, on the phone with Samantha, giving updates. A woman entered the room quietly, dressed in plain clothes, her posture nervous. Her name was Maria, one of the nannies who had worked at the villa. She had turned herself in to Samantha's team and had requested to speak with Marissa. Claire stepped back, wary, but Marissa agreed. Maria sat slowly, folding her hands. Her accent was thick, her eyes red. "I took care of her, of Lila, since she was brought there. I gave her food, taught her letters. I brushed her hair at night." She paused. "But I also lied to her. Every day." "Maria says she was fierce," Maria said. "But that's not why I'm here. I need to tell you something." "Something you—" She looked up, gaze heavy. Lila isn't. She's not your biological daughter. Marissa froze. Her heart thundered in her chest. What? Maria continued, her voice shaking. 7 years ago, Richard Ashford killed a woman, a journalist. Her name was Danielle Voss. She was investigating the Dominion Path, digging too deep. She had a baby, a newborn. Marissa stared, not understanding. Maria pressed on. Art stole the baby, erased her name. He couldn't raise the child directly, not then. So Claire... She helped him. She changed the records, helped register the child under a different mother. The room spun. Marissa felt the weight of the confession slam against her like a car crash. She turned to Claire, who had gone still. Is it true? Claire's voice was barely audible. Yes. Marissa stood slowly. You knew? Claire nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I didn't know the truth back then. He told me you had agreed to a private adoption. I thought it was above board, but when I saw the real documents, years later, I couldn't fix it. I couldn't undo what I'd done. Marissa backed away, shaking, looking at Lila, who watched them with wide, uncertain eyes. So she's not mine, she whispered. Maria stepped forward. She is. Maybe not by blood, but every memory, every moment you fought, every night you cried. That's motherhood. He tried to rewrite her story. You gave her a real one. Marissa collapsed into a chair, breath shallow, heart aching with betrayal and love all at once. Lila crawled into her lap. I don't care where I came from, she said. You're my mom. You're my moonlight. Claire dropped to her knees beside them. I'm so sorry, Marissa. I can't undo what I did. But I'll testify. I'll bring every document I forged, every signature, every lie. Marissa didn't speak. She just held Lila tighter, knowing the world had changed again and that the war for justice was far from over. The courtroom in San Juan was colder than Marissa expected, not in temperature, but in tone, the sterile air laced with the quiet weight of bureaucracy, judgment, and legal boundaries that so often failed the very people they claimed to protect. She sat at the plaintiff's table, hands clenched tightly in her lap, her attorney beside her speaking in low, measured tones to the judge. Across the aisle, representatives from the Ashford estate sat in stiff silence, their suits sharp, their gazes blank, their strategy now reduced to legal loopholes and desperate preservation of name. Richard Ashford himself was not present. He had been arrested on multiple federal charges and detained without bail, pending extradition. But his absence didn't remove the shadow he had cast on every corner of this case. What remained was a question of legality versus love, of biology versus belonging. The DNA results had come 2 days prior, a sterile packet handed to Marissa in a white envelope with the court seal. 0% biological relation between Marissa Bellmont and Lila Voss. Marissa hadn't cried when she read it. She'd already cried all she could. Instead, she had turned to Lila, held her face in her hands, and whispered, This changes nothing. You are mine. Now seated before the judge in a courtroom lined with reporters, social workers, and child advocacy representatives, that truth was about to be tested. Samantha Vale stood to deliver the closing argument, her voice clear, confident. Your Honor, the court recognizes biological relation in matters of custody, but it also recognizes consistent caregiving, emotional bonding, and the welfare of the child. This child, Lila Voss, has known no safer place, no greater protector, no stronger attachment than the woman seated beside her. DNA is not the only way we define family. Sometimes, family is forged in the fire of loyalty, sacrifice, and love. The judge nodded thoughtfully, his eyes moving to Lila, who sat beside Marissa in a pressed blue dress, her hands clasped tightly, her chin held high despite the tremble in her lower lip. The judge leaned forward. Miss Voss, would you like to say something? The courtroom went silent. Lila turned to look at Marissa, who nodded gently, her eyes shimmering. Then the girl stood, her small frame dwarfed by the courtroom furniture, but her voice rang out with clarity no one expected. I don't need matching blood, she said. I just need the person who didn't give up on me for 5 years. When I was scared, she searched. When I was lost, she fought. She's not my mom because of science. She's my mom because she came back. She never left. She never gave up. "Mommy is my home." A gasp swept through the courtroom. The judge's face softened, and even one of the opposing attorneys looked away, blinking rapidly. Marissa's tears came then, not from pain, but from something deeper. She reached out, took Lila's hand, and held it as if anchoring herself to the one truth that had withstood every storm. The judge took a moment, then delivered his ruling with firm conviction. The matter of guardianship of Lila Voss, the court grants full custody and parental rights to Miss Marissa Bellmont, recognizing her as the legal guardian and mother of record. Applause broke out behind them, hushed but emotional. Marissa closed her eyes, overwhelmed. Claire hugged her from behind, whispering, "You did it. You brought her home." 3 weeks later, on a sunny Saturday morning, Marissa and Lila returned to Bayshore Plaza, not with flyers, not with grief, but with something they hadn't shared in years: time. Hand in hand, they walked past the Wonder Zone where everything had begun, its walls now repainted, its security upgraded. A different world from the one that once swallowed Lila whole. They passed by the food vendor cart Marissa used to run, now owned by Luca and renamed Moonlight Delights, in tribute to a phrase that would never again be forgotten. Shoppers passed them without stares, without whispers, just another mother and daughter in the flow of weekend life. They stopped near the central fountain, the same one where Marissa had once taped her final missing persons poster. Lila looked up at her. "Do you remember the sound the water used to make when we sat here?" Marissa smiled. "I remember you always tried to toss pennies into it, but you never made it past the second ring." Lila grinned. "I want to try again." She pulled a coin from her pocket, stepped forward, and tossed. The penny soared, then landed with a soft splash in the center ring. She turned back, triumphant. Marissa clapped softly. "You did it!" Lila walked back and took her mother's hand again. "I'm ready to remember everything now, not just the bad parts." Marissa squeezed her fingers gently. "Then let's start here." And together, under the gentle sun, beside the plaza that had once broken them, they began again. Not as victims, not as stories for headlines, but as mother and daughter, whole, healing, and finally home. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with more powerful, true, inspired mysteries. What part of the story struck you the most? Were you surprised by the truth about Lila's past? Let us know your thoughts in the comments and tell us where in the world you're watching from. We read every message.